But then come 90s, people were also interested in saiga horns, which is the main reason that dropped the population down to very low numbers. So by 2002, we lost 95% of the entire population, which granted saigas a status of the fastest declining mammal species in the world.
Welcome to Nature's Guardians. I'm Micah Siegel. Each week, I talk with people working to save and help animals around the world. They are nature's guardians, and you can become one too. Today, I'm talking with Olya Esipova from Saiga Conservation Alliance. Welcome to the show, Olya.
Hi, Micah. Nice to be here.
Okay, so to start, tell me about your background and how you got where you are now.
Okay, so I've been involved with conservation, with saiga conservation since I was a teenager, and that's largely because of my parents. Both of my parents are biologists, but my story is a bit different because while they were out there in the field, I was in the city doing the normal city stuff. So like for me, their jobs always looked a bit weird and unusual because not a lot of people back in the days in my country have been involved in conservation or biology. And so every time they would go to the field, I would be very surprised because the parents of my friends would not be doing that. And I would be like, okay, but that's so uncomfortable because you need to sleep in tents and there is no showers and stuff like that. So one day they were like, okay, you should come with us and maybe you'll understand. So they took me to the field. And at first I was like, okay, that's a long road. We need to drive for 3 days. But then I started to understand it because the landscape looked completely different. The area where we work in Uzbekistan is like the moon surface. Like there is nothing there. There is just like this crooked land. You can see the stars. It's just beautiful at night, which you don't get to see in the city because of the light pollution. And so that made a big impression on me. And this is also how and when I heard about the saiga, this very mysterious creature, the antelope that lives there, but nobody can see it. So I really wanted to see one, and I came back for the second field trip and for the third one, and I just kept coming back. I got really engaged, and that's how I got involved in conservation.
So did your parents study saigas?
Yes, my mom started studying saiga when she was working in the Academy of Sciences in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent. That was one of the species, and this is how she discovered that the situation with the saiga is very bad. She started studying saiga in the late 90s, right after the breakdown of the Soviet Union, at the time when not a lot of people even could afford to spend time doing science because the government has changed. There was a lot of uncertainty going on, and so a lot of species, a lot of the environment has not been studied properly during those years. And so this is how she came to realize that, okay, there is the saiga antelope, it's in decline and needs some protection. Saigas are those amazing, very weird-looking creatures with big noses. They live in the Central Asian steppe. The saigas are the size of the goat. But they are very hard to see in the range states because and everybody gets asking about their noses, why they have such large noses. And this is largely because it serves two big purposes. One, they filter the air when they run during the summer times because they live in the very dusty areas. And the second purpose is that they heat up the air during the winter time when it gets very cold.
So do you have a presentation ready for us?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so today I have two stories to tell. One is about saiga antelope as a species, and another one is about green skills and why we believe that green skills is the way to promote saiga conservation in the Central Asian steppe. The animal that you can see here is the saiga antelope itself. Saigas are fantastic, as I said before, because they just look so different, so weird, and that's the interesting part about them for me, because I don't see quite the same animal. And this is me. That was our recent trip to the habitat. Behind me is the Central Asian steppe. That's where saiga antelope lives. And this is our recent trip from this September. So what happened there is we were able to do a lot of saiga monitoring, to set up camera traps and do educational activities. And my role in Saiga Conservation Alliance is Research and Development Officer. I've been involved since I was a teenager, so for the past 8 years. The cool thing about the Central Asian steppe, first of all, let me show it on the map. If you think about Europe and Russia, Central Asia is located right south from Europe, south from Russia. The saigas are not only found in Uzbekistan, they are also found in Kazakhstan, Russia, and Mongolia. And this is the map of the saiga habitat. There are 5 populations worldwide. We share one population between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. That's the transboundary population that needs to cross the country border every time that the saigas migrate. The biggest number of saigas are currently in Kazakhstan. One interesting fact is that part of the saiga habitat is located where the cold winter deserts of Turan are. And as of September 2023, the cold winter deserts of Turan were recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage. That's a very good news for the region and for the saiga, because hopefully this recognition will foster the saiga conservation in the region even more and make it even more efficient. But it not only concerns the saiga antelope, but also the other species that coexist with the saiga, the area, the ecosystem, the entire ecosystem of the Central Asia, which is very cool news. Saigas are amazing because, as I said earlier, they are the relic of the Ice Age. So they've been here for a long time. They're still with us. And so what you can see is this photo in front of us. This is the saiga, how they look in winter. They change color depending on the season. In winter, they typically turn white and become very fluffy. There's also a difference between males and females. So this is a photo of a typical male, and males have horns, while females don't. And this is the comparison between winter and summer. So this is the color of saiga in summer. So they have this like hazelnut, chestnut kind of color. Whereas in winter, if we go back, they turn white, like I said. I personally like the winter image of the saigas because they just look even more unique then. Saigas migrate. That's a very typical thing for them to do. And their migration is pretty long. So they go for 1,500 miles, which would be the equivalent of traveling between San Francisco, California to Austin, Texas. And they do it twice a year, every year. They typically migrate to find better pastures. So, for example, in March would be a time when they migrate, and also in November. They typically migrate in herds, and they can run very fast too. So they can travel with the speed of a car, which is approximately 50 miles per hour. Of course, I probably wouldn't be here today if everything was great with saigas. So there are a number of challenges the saiga face these days. One of the challenges is habitat loss. So here I'm talking about linear infrastructure. So this is in front of you a border fence between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So the problem is for the saiga, they cannot migrate through this fence, like they cannot go through. So we created the passes in this border fence so that at least saigas can go through those corridors and maybe go like underneath of the border, which helped a bit, but ideally it would be a lot better if there was no fence at all. It also includes industrial impact. So there are numerous companies that operate in the region, such as gas and oil companies, and there's a lot of disturbance that comes out of their activities, things such as light pollution, noise pollution, and just the presence in the area. Saiga is a very shy animal. They typically don't communicate with people in any way. They stay away as far as possible. It's very easy to get them scared away, so they would not come back to the pastures where they would normally come to if there is some kind of human activity, especially on the industrial level. There's also poaching. The saiga horns are used in traditional Chinese medicine, just like rhino horn. If you remember, only saiga males have horns, so there is selective hunting that is quite present. Another issue is the disease outbreak. Over the years, there were numerous cases where saiga populations would go down due to the disease outbreaks. The biggest one happened in Kazakhstan in 2015, when we lost over 200,000 saigas due to Pasteurella bacteria. Those kind of cases are typically cannot be predicted. Therefore, the best thing that we can do in such cases is to ensure that the saiga populations are healthy, the saigas are numerous in those populations, and they can bounce back after the occurrence of the disease outbreak. But the problem is that the large number of saigas can die in the span of just a few days. There was another case in Mongolia 2 years later, which is when the disease was transmitted from the livestock. And just to tell you how the population have been changing over time, we usually typically compare saiga numbers to the numbers that were present in the 80s and in the 90s. So it is considered that the saiga population was healthy in early 80s and early 90s. And there we had over 1 million saigas. The numbers were going up and down a bit, but overall, when we talk about the saigas, we talk about 100,000, we talk about millions. Because saigas, they live in herds. It's not a predator species where typically you would see smaller numbers. It's a prey species, so we really need hundreds of thousands of saigas for the population to be considered stable and healthy. So in the early 90s, the population was still over 1 million. However, this is the time when people got interested in poaching. There was some recreational hunting going on earlier as well, and that was predominantly trophy hunting, so people would just do it as a sport. And it was not prohibited to hunt saigas back then because the numbers were high. But then come 90s, people were also interested in saiga horns, which is the main reason that dropped the population down to very low numbers. So by 2002, we lost 95% of the entire population, which granted saigas the status of the fastest declining mammal species in the world. So we ended up with just like 200,000 saigas, even less, worldwide, which is a critically low number. This is how saiga got the status of critically endangered animal. You may be wondering what the situation is right now, because we are now in 2023, and a lot of organizations put a lot of efforts into conserving the species. And I have very good news to share with you today, because as of latest monitoring that we conducted this year, we recorded 1.9 million saigas, which is the record high number, the highest that we have ever seen since the decline of saiga has started. So this is fantastic news. A lot of people, a lot of organizations, individuals, and communities put a lot of efforts into conserving this species. So finally we can see the good results of this work. I have to mention that mostly those saigas are found in Kazakhstan, but saigas in Uzbekistan, in Russia, and Mongolia still need some support. So we managed to conserve saiga very well in one country, so now we need to conserve saiga in all of the 3 remaining countries to bring them to the same level. In Saiga Conservation Alliance, we do multiple projects. So we support protected areas, we support anti-poaching activities, we do biological research, and we mitigate the impact on biodiversity when it comes to larger companies. There are also alternative livelihoods that we offer to local communities. But the main program that I want to talk about today is education. Because the biggest issue that we noticed over the years is that there is a lack of environmental education in the saiga range states. Local people just don't see saigas anymore. They don't know why conserve saiga or other species. There is absolutely no connection between the natural world and with the world that people live day to day. So these days, for example, in Uzbekistan, if you ask somebody like a school kid if they know about the saiga, it's very likely that they say that they don't know it because they don't see it, because the numbers of saigas in Uzbekistan are very low still. Therefore, we have this framework of targeting different community groups to engage them in the development of green skills, in engagement with conservation and preservation of the environment, and specifically conservation of saiga. So we target 3 segments. We work with very young kids, like school kids, we work with teenagers, and we work with working professionals. So the first group here is our school kids. As you can see, we put together a lot of different festivals. We run some educational activities, some exhibitions where kids would draw saigas, for example. One of such big festivals is called Saiga Day, and those are the photos from the Saiga Day that we did this year, earlier in May. So during Saiga Day, we do a lot of different activities. Kids put together different shows. As I said, there are different competitions when it comes to drawing, singing, dancing. They can also deliver lectures to the younger kids and so on and so forth. So that's one of the most favorite ones. And we do it in all Saiga range states. So the key thing about this is that it connects different people that are based in steppe wildlife clubs. And there's a network of wildlife clubs that operates in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, that brings this entire big community together. They have a lot of exchange. So that's a very beloved program that I personally also really enjoy. Then we also have older kids, so like whenever kids graduate from high school or whenever they start university, they can also apply to our Young Conservation Leader or small grant programs. And this way we can support applied projects that the participants from the states came up with. So this is basically giving them an opportunity to realize their own project. It has to be related to conservation, to saiga conservation, and this way they can practice their skills directly without relying on somebody to tell them what to do. And this way they can also use this project as a base for their continuous studies later on in the future. So here, for example, you can see Aybat, Mehriban, and Bayrama are our winners of these programs this year. And finally, there is a third segment when we talk about working professionals, about young adults and people that already have a career. So here I'm talking about teachers and scientists, I'm talking about rangers, government officials, tourism specialists, industry partners. A lot of people are currently working in different fields, but they don't think about conservation. They don't think about how their work can also impact the environment, because maybe not everybody chooses conservation as their long-term career, and this is fine, but everybody has a chance to contribute in their own capacity, in their own industry, in their own specialty. So we also try to work with different professionals by providing trainings, such as trainings in ecotourism, or trainings to border guards, or training to industrial companies on how to mitigate their impact, on how to detect saiga horns and illegal trade, on how to reduce the impact of the tourism industry on the environment, on the saiga habitat. Here you can find more information if you scan this QR code, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
You guys have been working really hard on that 1.9 million population. So, yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there saigas in zoos?
No, there are absolutely no saigas in the zoos. Typically, saigas do not do well in captivity. There used to be saigas in San Diego Zoo and in Los Angeles Zoo, I believe, but that's 20 years ago or more. So, no, currently there are no saigas in the zoos.
So tell us more about their biology and how they live and how they eat.
Well, one of the cool adaptations that saiga have that helps them to, to grow numbers so quickly is that is their birthing strategy. So, for example, a female saiga becomes fertile only 7 months at 7 months old. So it can already give birth to a saiga starting from 7 months, and then during the first year, typically it's just one calf, but starting from the second year and on, those are 2 saigas or even triplets. So this way they can give birth to a lot of saigas, and they can start giving birth very quickly. So that helps to repopulate the population very efficiently. Another thing that I really like about saigas is that they can run very fast, so that helps them to survive, to get away from the predators. Natural predators of the saiga would be wolves, foxes, and some of the bigger predator birds like eagles. They're typically interested in calves, but saiga babies learn to run only 1 day after they're being born, so they can already run very fast and they can outrun most of the predators.
So what about how do the females and males live, and what are the herds like?
So saigas typically live in harems, so meaning that there is 1 saiga male and, say, 20 females, so that would be a typical ratio. The number has been changing, so for example, when the saiga males were targeted for the selective hunting, there were less males, so there were in general less males for the females to mate with, so the harems could be, the ratio could be 1 saiga male to 40 females, which is already a bit too much, but yeah, that's typically how they live. Saiga herds can range in numbers, so it can be anything from, let's say, 5-10 saigas to 30, 40, and hundreds. So it really depends on the population and on the number of this population.
So do you work with governments to make sure that the saigas have enough land?
Oh, absolutely. We work very closely with the government. In fact, just this year we established a new protected area called Aralkum in Uzbekistan. That's northwest Uzbekistan, and it covers the area of 1 million hectares, which is pretty good. There is another protected area in Uzbekistan that was established, 3 years ago, called Saigachi Reserve, which is also great. So right now in Uzbekistan, the entire habitat of saigas is covered in protected area.
Do you have any saiga stories?
Yes, so one of my favorite story about the saiga, like how I got to see the saiga actually, was when I was traveling in Russia. And there's this reserve that is well protected by very brave rangers, and at first you don't see saigas at all, but there's one lake, very, very beautiful lake, where all the saigas would come down to during the daytime, because it's incredibly hot in the steppe, Central Asian steppe, and so all of the saigas would come there for the to drink some water and just to relax and hang out by the water. So I was there hidden in a height, so it's like a small tent where you would go so that saigas don't see you. You hide under that thing. You go there very early, like 4 a.m. in the morning. So we went there, we were waiting, and all of a sudden saigas came, first saigas came in the morning, and then a lot more saigas came in the afternoon hours, and that was incredible to see because they started playing in the water. There were saiga babies as well because it was summer, so already the time when they gave birth, and that was so fun to see their interaction, the noises that they make, because it's not what you expect actually. The noise is very deep and loud, especially for the Saiga baby. So you would expect something, I don't know, softer and cuter, but no, they are very loud in how they communicate. So that was very fun to see. Also how they chase each other around.
Sounds fun.
That was a lot of fun.
So tell us about your organization.
Saiga Conservation Alliance is the umbrella organization. So what it means is that we have our core team, and then we operate in all of the Saiga Range states. But it's not us directly. We work in partnership with other local organizations that are already established in those areas. So we coordinate different projects. We provide capacity building for those teams. Right now, for example, we are working on the portfolio of project, which was funded by the US government, interestingly enough. So this portfolio of projects is really aimed at conserving the species as a whole across the entire range. And so there are projects in Uzbekistan, in Kazakhstan, but also in consumer countries like Southeast Asia. So this way we can have all key partners talk to each other and coordinate and disseminate the findings from those projects. So what we do as SCA, for example, is we bring all of those partners and all of those projects together in the same room, and we make those different parties talk and share and build up on the experience of each other. So that's very helpful because this way, again, we don't need to do all the work just by ourselves with our small team, but actually work with the partners and experts in the field directly in the Saiga Range areas and in consumer countries, which is a very interesting model. We really like it because this way we support conservation directly on the ground, directly in the areas where saigas are found.
Okay, so what do you see for saigas for the next 30 years?
Oh, that's a very cool question. So what I see is that the focus is shifting from conserving the saiga as a species to conserving the steppe habitat, overall saiga habitat, steppe ecosystem. Why is it important? Well, it's not only about the saiga. Saiga doesn't live in a vacuum. There are so many other species that it interacts with that needs protection. So we cannot just focus on one species. In fact, it's not efficient to preserve one species and completely ignore all the others. So what I see for the saiga in the coming 30 years is that the efforts would be put into conserving the landscape, the environment, the ecosystem where the saigas live, alongside with other species, as well as the engagement of community and increasing the understanding of community at large of what conservation is, how to support conservation directly or indirectly through their actions. So it's really more about spreading the awareness and making sure that the wider landscape is well protected.
I hope we can help you raise more money to help saigas. Thank you for being on the podcast, Ola.
Thank you so much for talking to me today, Micah, and learning all about the saigas.
And thank you for watching. You can help animals by hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. See you next time on Nature's Guardians.